there are moments in life when every door seems locked, every answer feels delayed, and every burden becomes too heavy for human hands to carry. You've prayed, you've cried, you've waited, and still the mountain stands before you. But hear this clearly this morning. Impossible situations are the exact places where God reveals his unlimited power. What cannot be solved by people can be overturned by divine intervention in a single moment. Today, chains will break, fear will lose its grip, and battles you could not win on your own will be placed into the hands of the Almighty. Before this prayer is over, I need you to shift your mindset. Stop focusing on how impossible the situation looks and start focusing on how powerful your God is. Heaven is not intimidated by deadlines, sickness, financial struggles, broken relationships, or attacks against your peace. The same God who opened seas, raised the dead, and made a way in the wilderness is still moving today. This morning prayer is not just words, it is a declaration that your situation will not have the final say. God is about to step into places where human strength has failed. I don't know what burden you carried into this morning, but I know this: divine answers are closer than you think. Some battles cannot be fixed by strategy, connections, or effort alone. Some situations require the hand of God to intervene supernaturally. And when God steps in, confusion turns into clarity, lack turns into overflow, weakness turns into strength, and impossibilities turn into testimonies. As you pray today, expect heaven to move. Expect obstacles to shift. Expect peace to rise in your spirit even before the breakthrough appears. This is the morning to surrender every impossible situation completely to God. Every hidden fear, every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every impossible door standing in front of you, place it before him right now. Because when God enters the situation, what looked permanent can change overnight. What looked dead can live again. And what seemed impossible can become the very testimony that proves his power in your life. There are situations in life that cannot be solved by intelligence, money, influence, or human effort. There are battles that become so heavy that even the strongest people feel weak under the pressure. Some burdens follow you into the morning and keep you awake through the night. You may have tried every possible solution you know, spoken to every person you trust, and exhausted every ounce of strength within you, yet the situation still remains unchanged. But this is where faith must rise above fear, because impossible situations are not impossible for God. What overwhelms people does not overwhelm heaven. What confuses the human mind is already under the authority of the Almighty. God specializes in stepping into moments that appear hopeless. He moves in places where human ability reaches its limit. The world may tell you that your situation cannot change, but God has never been restricted by human limitations. He is not intimidated by broken circumstances, impossible deadlines, closed doors, sickness, financial pressure, emotional pain, or spiritual warfare. What looks final to people is only the beginning of a miracle when God becomes involved. He has the power to make a way where no way exists, and he can transform situations in ways no human mind could ever predict. There are people listening right now who feel surrounded by impossible circumstances. Maybe your family is under pressure. Maybe your finances have become unstable. Maybe you are carrying emotional pain that nobody else understands. Perhaps you have prayed for healing, restoration, opportunity, or peace, and the answer has not yet appeared. The silence has tested your faith, and the delay has made you question whether things will ever change. But delay does not mean denial. Silence does not mean absence. Even when you cannot see movement, God is still working behind the scenes in ways you cannot fully understand. Sometimes God allows impossible situations because he wants to reveal a level of power that could never be seen in ordinary circumstances. Miracles are born in moments where human strength is no longer enough. If everything could be solved by human effort alone, there would be no need for divine intervention. But when the obstacle is too large, when the storm is too intense, when the mountain is too high, that is often the very moment God begins to demonstrate his authority. The impossible becomes the stage where his power is revealed. You cannot measure God's ability by your current circumstances. Your situation may appear limited, but God is limitless. People may walk away, opportunities may disappear, and resources may run low, but heave. And never runs out of solutions. God can open doors nobody can shut. He can create opportunities that did not exist before. He can restore what was broken and rebuild what was lost. In one moment, he can shift the entire direction of your life. What takes people years to accomplish can happen suddenly when God releases favor over your situation. Fear often grows strongest when situations look impossible. The enemy wants you to believe that your struggle will never end. He wants you to focus on the size of the problem instead of the greatness of your God. But faith requires a different perspective. Faith declares that God is greater than every obstacle standing in front of you. Faith believes that even when circumstances appear unchanged, God still has the final word. Fear magnifies the problem, but faith magnifies the power of God. There are moments when you must stop speaking defeat over your life and begin declaring victory before the breakthrough arrives. Your words carry power. If you constantly speak hopelessness, fear, and failure, you strengthen the atmosphere of discouragement around you. But when you begin declaring that God is in control, something shifts within your spirit. Even before circumstances change, your faith begins to rise. You stop depending only on what you can see and start trusting in what God is able to do. God often works in ways people do not expect. Sometimes he sends answers through unexpected opportunities. Sometimes he removes distractions that were blocking your growth. Sometimes he closes one door because he has something greater prepared ahead. What feels like rejection may actually be divine protection. What feels like delay may actually be preparation. God sees the full picture while you only see the current moment. That is why trusting him requires surrender. You must believe that his wisdom is higher than your understanding. There are seasons where the pressure becomes so intense that you feel like giving up. You become tired of waiting, tired of fighting, tired of carrying the weight of uncertainty. But you cannot quit in the middle of the process. Some breakthroughs happen after long periods of struggle. Some miracles appear at the exact moment people are ready to lose hope. The enemy wants exhaustion to silence your faith, but God is calling you to remain steadfast even when the process feels difficult. Your impressions. Sybil's situation is not stronger than the power of God. That sickness is not greater than his healing power. That financial struggle is not greater than his provision. That emotional burden is not greater than his peace. That closed door is not greater than his authority. The same God who performed miracles before is still able to perform miracles today. He has not changed. His power has not weakened. His ability has not diminished. He still moves mountains, breaks chains, restores lives, and opens impossible doors. Sometimes the greatest battle happens within your own mind. Negative thoughts try to convince you that nothing will ever improve. Disappointment tries to destroy your expectation. But you must guard your spirit carefully during difficult seasons. Do not allow hopelessness to take root in your heart. Continue believing even when you cannot yet see the answer. Continue praying even when the situation feels unchanged. Continue trusting even when the path ahead appears uncertain. God is able to bring peace into chaotic situations. Even before the breakthrough arrives, he can strengthen your spirit so that fear no longer controls you. Peace is powerful because it reminds you that God remains in control regardless of what circumstances look like. When you trust him fully, anxiety loses its grip. Panic begins to fade. You stop carrying burdens that were never meant to rest on your shoulders alone. There are testimonies waiting to be born from the very situations that currently cause you pain. The struggle you face today may become the story that inspires someone else tomorrow. God has a way of turning brokenness into purpose and trials into testimonies. What the enemy intended for destruction, God can transform into victory. He can take the very area where you felt defeated and use it as evidence of his faithfulness. Do not underestimate what God can do in a single moment. One prayer can shift an atmosphere. One opportunity can change your future. One breakthrough can erase years of struggle. One touch from God can restore what seemed permanently broken. Human limitations do not limit divine power. What appears impossible on earth is fully possible with God. There comes a moment in every person's life when human strength is no longer enough. you reach the edge of your own ability, and suddenly you realize that no amount of planning, effort, or determination. A nation can solve the battle standing before you. It is in these moments that many people feel overwhelmed, discouraged, and defeated. They try harder, push themselves further, and carry burdens that become heavier with every passing day. But there is a powerful truth that must rise in your spirit this morning. When human strength fails, divine power begins. God often waits until human ability reaches its limits so his power can be revealed in a greater way. Many people spend their lives depending completely on their own understanding. They believe they must control every detail, solve every problem, and carry every responsibility alone. But life has a way of bringing situations that expose human weakness. Certain storms cannot be overcome through natural strength alone. Certain battles are too deep for human wisdom. There are moments when you must recognize that your breakthrough will not come from your own power, but from God moving supernaturally in your life. Sometimes God allows you to reach the end of yourself because dependence on Him produces a deeper level of faith. As long as people believe they can handle everything alone, they often leave little room for God to move. Boo. When your strength becomes exhausted, your heart becomes open to divine intervention. Weakness becomes the doorway through which God demonstrates His authority. The places where you feel powerless are often the very places where heaven begins to release strength. You may feel tired today, tired of fighting battles that never seem to end, tired of carrying responsibilities that feel too heavy, tired of praying and waiting for change while circumstances remain difficult. The pressure may have drained your energy emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. There are moments when even getting through the day feels difficult, but your weakness does not disqualify you from experiencing God's power. In fact, God often moves most powerfully through people who recognize their need for Him. The world teaches people to hide weakness and pretend they have everything under control. But God does not require perfection before He moves in your life. He responds to surrender. He responds to faith. He responds to hearts that admit they cannot make it without Him. Divine power flows where pride ends and dependence on God begins. Some people miss miracles because they continue trying to have NDLE impossible situations entirely on their own strength. There are burdens you were never meant to carry alone. Some people are carrying anxiety about the future, fear about finances, stress about relationships, and emotional wounds from battles nobody else can see. They smile in public while silently fighting private storms. But God sees every hidden struggle. He sees every tear, every sleepless night, every silent prayer, and every moment when exhaustion has nearly caused you to give up. Heaven is not blind to your pain. When human strength fails, many people begin to panic because they feel out of control. But loss of control is often where true faith begins. Faith requires trusting God even when you do not understand the process. It means believing that His power is greater than your limitations. Human strength depends on visible resources, but divine power operates beyond what the natural eye can see. God can create solutions where no solution exists. He can open doors that look permanently closed. He can restore situations that seemed beyond repair. You cannot rely only on your emotions during difficult seasons because emotions change constantly. Some days you feel strange. And other days you feel weak. Some days hope rises and other days discouragement tries to take over. But God's power is not dependent on your emotional condition. Even when you feel weak, He remains strong. Even when your faith feels small, His ability remains unlimited. Your exhaustion does not reduce His power. There are moments when God intentionally removes human support systems so people learn to trust Him more deeply. Sometimes the people you expected to help you walk away. Sometimes resources become limited. Sometimes opportunities disappear unexpectedly. These moments can feel painful and confusing, but they often reveal where your trust truly rests. If your confidence is built entirely on people, money, or circumstances, instability will always create fear. But when your confidence is rooted in God, you discover a peace that remains steady even during uncertainty. Divine power does not always appear the way people expect. Sometimes it comes through supernatural strength to endure difficult seasons. Sometimes it comes through wisdom and direction. Sometimes it comes through unexpected opportunities or sudden breakthroughs. God knows exactly how to intervene in every situation. His methods may not always make sense to the human mind, but his timing and wisdom are perfect. There are people listening right now who feel spiritually drained. The battles have lasted longer than expected, and the pressure has become overwhelming. You may feel like your prayers are weak or your faith is fading. But even when you feel empty, God can refill your spirit with strength. One moment in his presence can renew what stress and fear have drained from your life. He can restore your peace, renew your hope, and strengthen you for the journey ahead. Human effort alone can only take you so far. There are doors that cannot be opened through striving alone. There are chains that cannot be broken through human determination alone. There are battles that require divine intervention. This is why prayer matters. Prayer shifts your focus away from your own limitations and places your attention on God's unlimited ability. Prayer reminds you that you are not fighting alone. Many people wait until they are completely broken before turning fully to God. They exhaust themselves trying to solve everything independently. But surrender is not weakness. Trusting God is not defeat. It takes courage to admit you need divine help. It takes faith to release control and believe that God can handle what you cannot. The strongest people are not those who pretend to have no weakness. The strongest people are those who know where to go when their strength runs out. God has a way of carrying people through situations they thought would destroy them. There are testimonies from people who survived impossible battles because divine strength sustained them when human strength failed. They discovered that God can hold you together when life feels like it is falling apart. He can give peace in chaos, hope in darkness, and strength in exhaustion. The enemy wants weakness to convince you that you are defeated. He wants exhaustion to silence your prayers and discouragement to weaken your faith. But weakness can become the place where God reveals his glory most powerfully. When you stop depending entirely on yourself, you begin experiencing the strength that comes from heaven. Divine power is not limited by human weakness. In fact, it often shines brightest through people who know they cannot make it without God. No burden is too heavy for God to carry. No storm is too poor. Wonderful for him to calm. No situation is too broken for him to restore. Human strength may fail, but God never fails. His power does not grow weak with time. His ability is not reduced by difficulty. He remains faithful through every battle, every delay, every uncertainty, and every impossible situation. When your strength feels gone, do not lose hope. The moment you recognize your need for God may become the very moment heaven begins moving most powerfully in your life. There are battles in life that become too heavy to carry alone. Some struggles follow you everywhere, filling your mind with worry during the day and stealing your peace at night. You try to remain strong, but deep inside you feel exhausted from fighting the same battles repeatedly. Many people carry silent burdens that nobody else fully understands. They smile on the outside while their hearts are weighed down with fear, uncertainty, disappointment, and pressure. But there comes a moment when you must stop trying to control everything yourself and completely surrender every battle into God's hands. Surrender is one of the hardest things for people to do because human nature wants control. People want to know how. Situations will work out, when answers will come, and what the future will look like. The mind constantly searches for solutions, trying to fix problems through human understanding alone. But some battles cannot be won through human effort. Some situations require complete dependence on God. Surrender means trusting him even when you cannot see the full picture. It means believing that his wisdom is greater than your understanding and his power is greater than your limitations. Many people confuse surrender with weakness, but surrendering to God is actually an act of faith. It takes strength to release fear. It takes courage to stop carrying burdens that are destroying your peace. When you surrender your battles to God, you are not giving up hope. You are placing your confidence in a power greater than yourself. You are acknowledging that God can do what human strength cannot accomplish. There are people listening right now who are carrying battles that have lasted far too long. Some are fighting emotional battles filled with anxiety, heartbreak, and discouragement. Others are struggling financially, wondering how they will provide for their needs. Some are carrying the pain of being. Broken relationships, unanswered prayers, or uncertainty about the future. The pressure has become so overwhelming that fear constantly whispers that nothing will ever change. But surrender changes the atmosphere of your spirit because it shifts the weight of the battle from your shoulders into God's hands. You were never created to carry every burden alone. Fear grows when people try to control situations entirely by themselves. Worry becomes overwhelming when you feel personally responsible for solving every problem. But God never intended for you to live under constant pressure and anxiety. He invites you to bring every burden, every fear, every impossible situation before Him. Nothing is too complicated for His wisdom. Nothing is too broken for His power. Nothing is too heavy for Him to carry. One of the greatest obstacles to surrender is fear of the unknown. People often hold tightly to their struggles because they fear what might happen if they release control. They continue stressing over situations because worrying feels safer than trusting. But worry has never solved a single problem. Anxiety drains strength, steals peace, and clouds judgment. Surrender, however, creates room for divine peace to enter your life. When you place your battles into God's hands, you stop depending solely on your own ability and begin trusting in His faithfulness. God sees every hidden battle you face. He sees the tears nobody else notices. He understands the thoughts that keep you awake at night. He knows the fears you struggle to speak aloud. Nothing about your situation surprises Him. Even when circumstances feel chaotic and uncertain, God remains fully aware of every detail of your life. His understanding is complete and His power is unlimited. Sometimes people pray while still secretly trying to maintain control. They ask God for help but continue carrying the weight of fear and anxiety within themselves. True surrender means releasing the outcome into God's hands completely. It means trusting Him even when the answer does not come immediately. Faith is not only believing God can move, faith is continuing to trust Him while you wait. There are seasons when surrender feels uncomfortable because God's process does not always align with human expectations. Sometimes answers take longer than expected. Sometimes God closes doors people desperately wanted opened. Sometimes He leads people through uncomfortable transitions that challenge their understanding. But surrender requires believing that God sees what you cannot see. He knows which opportunities are harmful and which paths will lead to purpose. His perspective reaches beyond the present moment. Many battles become heavier because people constantly replay fear and negativity in their minds. They imagine worst-case scenarios and speak defeat over their situations. But surrender also involves changing the way you think and speak. You cannot fully trust God while continuously declaring hopelessness. Your words shape your perspective. When you constantly speak fear, you strengthen discouragement within your spirit. But when you begin declaring that God is in control, peace begins replacing panic. There is freedom in surrendering every battle to God. The burden becomes lighter because you no longer feel alone in the struggle. Surrender does not mean challenges disappear instantly, but it changes how you carry them. Instead of being consumed by fear, you begin walking in confidence that God is working behind the scenes. Instead of allowing anxiety to dominate your mind, you begin resting in assurance that heaven is still in control. God often works in ways people never expect. Some battles are won through sudden breakthroughs, while others are won through quiet endurance and inner transformation. Sometimes God changes the situation, and other times He changes the person going through the situation. In every case, surrender allows Him to move freely within your life. Resistance creates frustration, but trust opens the door for peace and direction. The enemy wants you trapped in fear because fear weakens faith. Fear convinces people to carry burdens they were meant to release. Fear magnifies obstacles until they seem impossible to overcome. But surrender weakens fear because it reminds you that God is greater than every challenge standing before you. No problem is too large for Him. No storm is too powerful for Him to calm. No chain is too strong for Him to break. There are moments when surrender must happen daily. Every morning you may need to place your worries, fears, plans, and uncertainties before God again. Human emotions naturally drift toward anxiety, especially during difficult seasons. But every act of surrender strengthens your faith and deepens your trust. USD in God's ability to sustain you. You do not have to understand every detail of the journey in order to trust God with your life. Some answers only become clear with time. Some prayers are answered in ways people never expected. But God remains faithful even when circumstances appear uncertain. His silence is not abandonment. His delays are not rejection. Even when you cannot see movement, He is still working. Surrendering every battle into God's hands means believing that His power is greater than your weakness, His wisdom is greater than your confusion, and His peace is greater than your fear. It means releasing the constant pressure to control everything and resting in the confidence that God is able to carry what you cannot handle alone. The battles you face today do not define the outcome of your future. God has the ability to turn impossible situations into testimonies, pain into purpose, and brokenness into restoration. When you fully surrender your life and your battles into His hands, you position yourself to experience a level of peace, strength, and divine intervention that human effort alone could never produce. Fear has a way of speaking loudly during difficult sessions. It whispers that nothing will change, that the situation is too far gone, and that the future holds more disappointment than hope. Fear magnifies every obstacle and causes people to focus more on problems than possibilities. It fills the mind with negative thoughts and convinces the heart to expect defeat before the battle is even over. But there is power in speaking faith over fear and delay. Your words shape your atmosphere, influence your mindset, and strengthen either your fear or your faith. Many people unknowingly speak defeat over their lives every single day. They constantly declare that things will never improve, that opportunities will never come, or that their situation is hopeless. Over time, these words begin shaping the way they think and respond to life. Fear grows stronger when negative thoughts are repeated continuously. Discouragement becomes heavier when hopelessness is constantly spoken aloud. But faith requires a different language. Faith speaks possibility even when circumstances look impossible. There are seasons where delay tests your patience and challenges your confidence in God. You pray for answers, but nothing seems to happen immediately. You wait for doors to open, yet the opportunities remain closed. You ask God for direction, healing, restoration, or breakthrough, but the silence becomes frustrating. During these moments, fear tries to convince you that the delay means failure. But delay does not mean God has abandoned you. Delay does not mean your prayers are being ignored. Sometimes God is preparing things behind the scenes that you cannot yet see. Fear always focuses on what is missing, but faith focuses on what God is capable of doing. Fear says the battle is too difficult, but faith declares that God is greater than every obstacle. Fear says the delay will never end, but faith believes that breakthrough can happen suddenly. Fear speaks defeat before the outcome is known, while faith continues trusting God even when there is no visible evidence yet. The words you speak during difficult seasons matter more than many people realize. Your mouth can either strengthen your faith or strengthen your fear. When you constantly speak negativity, anxiety increases within your spirit. But when you begin declaring God's promises over your life, your perspective starts shifting. Faith-filled words create strength within you. Heart even before circumstances begin to change. There are people listening right now who have spent too much time speaking hopelessness over their future. Every disappointment convinced them to expect more pain. Every delay caused them to lower their expectations. Fear became so familiar that they stopped believing for greater things. But this morning, your language must change. You cannot expect victory while constantly declaring defeat. You cannot walk in confidence while continually speaking fear over your situation. Speaking faith does not mean pretending challenges do not exist. Faith is not denial. Faith simply refuses to allow fear to have the final word. You can acknowledge the reality of a difficult situation while still believing God has the power to transform it. Faith does not ignore obstacles. It places those obstacles beneath the authority of God. There are moments when fear feels overwhelming because circumstances appear unchanged for a long time. Waiting can become emotionally exhausting. The human mind naturally wants immediate answers and visible progress, but God often works in processes that require patience. Some breakthroughs happen instantly, while others unfold gradually over time. Delay can become dangerous when people allow frustration to turn into hopelessness. That is why protecting your words and mindset during waiting seasons is so important. The enemy wants delay to weaken your faith. He wants you to assume that unanswered prayers mean forgotten prayers. He wants discouragement to silence your expectation. But your breakthrough is not determined by the opinions of people or the limitations of circumstances. God's timing is not controlled by human understanding. He can move suddenly in ways nobody expected. Fear often grows strongest when people focus too heavily on visible circumstances. They look at their finances, relationships, health struggles, or disappointments and assume things will never improve. But faith requires looking beyond what can currently be seen. Faith believes that God is still working even when visible evidence is absent. Some of the greatest miracles begin forming long before people recognize them. Your mind becomes a battlefield during seasons of fear and delay. Negative thoughts constantly attempt to take control. Worry replays worst-case scenarios repeatedly. Anxiety creates mental exhaustion, and these steals peace from the heart. But you must become intentional about rejecting thoughts that oppose faith. Not every thought deserves agreement. Fearful thinking weakens your spirit, but faith-filled thinking strengthens your ability to endure difficult seasons. There is power in declaring victory before the breakthrough arrives. When you speak faith, you remind yourself that God remains greater than your circumstances. You shift your focus away from limitations and place your attention on divine possibility. Your words become a weapon against discouragement. Even when emotions feel unstable, speaking faith creates strength within your spirit. Many people allow delay to destroy their confidence because they expected God to move according to their personal timeline. But God's perspective reaches far beyond human understanding. Sometimes He delays certain blessings because preparation is still happening behind the scenes. Sometimes closed doors are protecting you from wrong opportunities. Sometimes waiting seasons are developing patience, wisdom, and deeper trust within your spirit. Fear will always try to rush you into panic, but faith teaches you to remain steady during uncertain times. NTY, you do not need to know every detail of the future in order to trust God. Faith believes that even when the path ahead seems unclear, God is still guiding every step. Confidence in Him creates peace even when circumstances remain uncertain. There are people who gave up too early because delay convinced them that nothing was happening. They stopped praying, stopped believing, and stopped expecting breakthrough because they became tired of waiting. But many blessings are missed when people abandon faith during the process. Some breakthroughs happen after long periods of silence. Some miracles appear at the moment people least expect them. Fear and faith cannot dominate your heart at the same time. One will always become stronger depending on what you feed consistently. If you constantly feed fear through negative thinking and hopeless speech, anxiety will grow stronger. But if you feed faith through prayer, trust, and declarations of God's power, confidence will rise within your spirit. You must stop allowing fear to define your future. Your past disappointments do not determine what God can still do in your life. Delays do not cancel divine promises. Closed doors do not mean God has run out of opportunities. Difficult seasons do not mean your story is over. God still has the power to shift situations suddenly and unexpectedly. Speaking faith over fear and delay means choosing trust even when uncertainty remains. It means refusing to let discouragement silence your hope. It means declaring that God is faithful regardless of how long the process takes. Every time you reject fear and choose faith, your spirit becomes stronger. Every time you continue trusting despite delay, your confidence in God deepens. The battle may still be present, but fear does not have to control you anymore. Delay may still exist, but hopelessness does not have to dominate your mind. Faith reminds you that God remains in control even when answers have not fully appeared. What feels delayed today can become a testimony tomorrow, and what seems impossible now can suddenly shift through the power of God. There is a difference between praying out of routine and praying with expectation. Many people speak words in prayer, but deep inside they no longer expect anything to change. Disappointment, delay, and repeated struggles have weakened their confidence over time. They continue PR, eyeing because they feel they should, but fear and discouragement quietly whisper that breakthrough may never come. This is why expectation matters. Expectation positions your heart to believe that God is still able to move in impossible situations. Expectation keeps faith alive even when circumstances appear unchanged. A supernatural breakthrough is not limited by human conditions. It does not depend entirely on resources, connections, qualifications, or visible opportunities. When God decides to move, situations can change suddenly and unexpectedly. Doors that remain closed for years can open in a single moment. Answers can arrive from places people never imagined. Burdens that seemed permanent can be lifted through divine intervention. God specializes in doing what human effort alone cannot accomplish. Many people have become so focused on their current problems that they no longer expect good things to happen. Fear trained them to anticipate disappointment instead of breakthrough. Every failed attempt, every painful experience, and every unanswered prayer slowly reduced their confidence. Over time, survival replaced expectation. Instead of waking up believing God could move powerfully in their lives, they began expecting more struggle, more delay, and more frustration. But this morning, your spirit must shift from hopelessness to expectation. You cannot fully receive what you no longer believe is possible. Faith requires expectation. It requires believing that God can still intervene even after long periods of waiting. It means refusing to let negative circumstances become permanent in your mindset. The enemy wants people trapped in hopelessness because hopelessness weakens faith. Once people stop expecting breakthrough, they often stop pursuing God with confidence and boldness. There are situations in your life right now that may look impossible in the natural. Perhaps your finances are under pressure, your health is declining, your relationships feel broken, or your future seems uncertain. Human reasoning may tell you there is no solution, but supernatural breakthrough operates beyond human reasoning. God is not limited by the obstacles that intimidate people. He can create opportunities where none existed before. He can restore what seemed permanently damaged. He can bring healing, provision, favor, peace, and direction in ways no human mind could. Do you fully predict? Sometimes people miss breakthrough because they become too consumed by visible circumstances. They focus entirely on what is going wrong instead of recognizing what God is still capable of doing. Fear magnifies problems until they appear larger than God's promises. But faith shifts your focus away from limitations and places your attention on divine power. The size of the obstacle does not determine the outcome when God is involved. There are moments when breakthrough begins internally before it appears externally. God often changes the condition of the heart before changing visible circumstances. He strengthens faith, renews hope, restores peace, and develops spiritual endurance during waiting seasons. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not only the external answer, but the transformation happening within you during the process. Supernatural breakthrough often happens when people least expect it. One moment, everything appears unchanged, and the next moment, the situation shifts completely. God can move suddenly. One phone call can change your future. One opportunity can open a new season. One prayer can break years of oppression. One act of divine favor can accompaniment what years of human effort could not achieve. Never underestimate what God can do in a single moment. Expectation changes the way you approach prayer. Instead of praying from a place of fear and desperation, you begin praying with confidence that God hears you. You stop seeing prayer as empty words and begin recognizing it as a connection to divine power. Your faith becomes stronger because expectation reminds you that heaven is still active and God is still moving. There are people who secretly feel unworthy of breakthrough because of past mistakes, failures, or disappointments. Shame has convinced them that blessings are for other people, but not for them. But God's power is not restricted by your past. He specializes in restoring broken people, rebuilding damaged lives, and creating new beginnings from painful situations. His grace reaches places human judgment cannot understand. You must guard your heart carefully during seasons of waiting because negativity can slowly destroy expectation. Constant discouragement, fear, and doubt can weaken your spirit if you allow them to dominate your thinking. This is why speaking faith is important. Your words influence your mindset. If you constantly declare hopelessness, your expectation will decrease. But when you begin declaring that God is able, your spirit becomes stronger. Breakthrough does not always arrive according to personal timelines. Sometimes delays happen because preparation is still taking place behind the scenes. God sees details people cannot see. He understands timing in ways human minds cannot fully comprehend. What feels slow to you may actually be perfect timing from heaven's perspective. Waiting seasons are difficult, but they do not mean God has forgotten you. There are blessings being prepared that you cannot yet see. There are opportunities developing behind closed doors. There are answers already moving toward your life, even though no visible evidence has appeared yet. Faith continues believing during the unseen process. Expectation refuses to let delay become permanent hopelessness. Supernatural breakthrough often requires people to release control and trust God more deeply. Human nature wants complete understanding before feeling secure. People want visible evidence before believing change is possible. But faith walks forward even when certainty is absent. Trusting God means be. Believing His power remains active even when circumstances appear silent. The enemy wants people trapped in emotional exhaustion because exhausted minds struggle to expect anything good. After enough disappointment, people begin protecting themselves by lowering expectations. They stop believing for greater things because disappointment became too painful. But lowering your expectation also limits your ability to recognize the opportunities and blessings God may place before you. God is still able to exceed human expectations. He can do more than your fears predict and more than your circumstances suggest. He is not restricted by economic conditions, medical reports, relationship failures, or human limitations. His power reaches beyond natural systems. What seems impossible for people remains fully possible for God. There are moments when you must intentionally choose expectation even while circumstances remain difficult. You may not see immediate evidence, but faith continues trusting anyway. You may not understand the process, but expectation keeps your heart open to what God can still do. Every prayer spoken in faith becomes an act of confidence in God's ability to intervene. Your breakthrough may arrive in ways you never expected. God often works through unexpected opportunities, surprising connections, sudden favor, and divine timing. What looked delayed can suddenly accelerate. What seemed blocked can suddenly open. What appeared impossible can suddenly become reality through the power of God. Expectation creates room for hope to rise again. It reminds you that your current struggle is not the final chapter of your story. God still has the ability to shift circumstances, restore peace, heal wounds, provide solutions, and open new doors. The same God who performed miracles before still moves today, and supernatural breakthrough remains possible for those who continue believing.